For months, it sat silent in dry dock, a $13 billion giant stripped open, repaired, and upgraded. Now, the US Navy's most powerful aircraft carrier is moving back into an active war zone. This isn't just another deployment. It's 100,000 tons of steel, 75 aircraft, and 5,000 personnel sailing straight into one of the most dangerous flashpoints on Earth. The question is, what happens next? Are you ready? Let it dive in, but first question first, what are we talking about exactly? We're talking about the USS Gerald R. Ford, the most advanced and most expensive aircraft carrier ever built. This thing costs about $13.3 billion just to build. That's not counting the air wing. Add the aircraft, and you're easily pushing the total package closer to $20+ billion. For comparison, that's more than the GDP of some small countries. It's basically a floating city that launches fighter jets. The Ford is the lead ship of the Ford-class carriers, replacing the older Nimitz class. It weighs around 100,000 tons and stretches over 1,100 feet long. That's longer than 3 football fields laid end to end. If you stood on the flight deck, you'd have about 4.5 acres of space. You could park thousands of cars up there, but instead they park F-35s and F/A-18 Super Hornets. It runs on 2 nuclear reactors. The Ford-class reactors allow it to operate for over 20 years without refueling. No gas stops, no vulnerable fuel convoys. It can stay at sea for months. On board, around 4,500 to 5,000 sailors and aircrew are fully deployed. That's a small town at sea, complete with medical facilities, food services, and enough daily meals served to rival a Vegas buffet. That endurance alone gives it a huge strategic advantage. Now here's where it gets futuristic. Instead of old-school steam catapults, the Ford uses the electromagnetic aircraft launch system, EMALS. Basically, it slingshots jets into the sky using electromagnetic power. It's smoother, faster, and designed to launch aircraft more efficiently. The Navy says the Ford class can generate up to 160 sorties per day and surge even higher in wartime, about 25% more than older carriers. The Ford conducted its first full combat deployment in 2023, operating in the Mediterranean during heightened Middle East tensions. It proved it could handle real-world operations, not just PowerPoint slides. So if this $13 billion aircraft carrier is basically a floating city and air force combined, why did it need to sit in dry dock? First, understand this. An aircraft carrier is under constant stress. A ship like the USS Gerald R. Ford weighs about 100,000 tons. That's heavier than 70,000 cars. Now imagine launching fighter jets off its deck every few minutes. Each F/A-18 Super Hornet weighs around 30 tons fully loaded, and it's being catapulted from 0 to 150+ miles per hour in just a few seconds. That kind of force, repeated thousands of times, takes a serious toll. During deployment, Ford-class carriers are designed to generate up to 160 sorties per day in surge conditions, about 25% more than older Nimitz-class carriers. More flights mean more wear on catapults, arresting gear, and deck surfaces. Then there's the technology factor. The Ford class introduced new systems like the Electromagnetic Aircraft Launch System (EMALS) and advanced weapons elevators. Early in its service life, these systems had reliability issues. The Navy invested heavily to improve performance, and recent reports show mission-capable rates have significantly improved. But upgrades and fixes require time in controlled dock conditions. There's also the nuclear side. While the reactors don't need refueling for 20+ years, other propulsion components, cooling systems, and onboard electronics need inspection and modernization. Remember, this ship carries nearly 5,000 sailors and aircrew. It has its own hospital, power grid, and airport. Maintaining it is like servicing a small city that floats. And finally, dry dock time isn't just repairs, it's preparation. Before entering a live conflict zone, the Navy ensures radar systems, missile defenses, communication networks, and aircraft support systems are fully mission-ready. But now that the repairs are complete, let's examine where it's heading next. When most people hear Red Sea conflict, they think of faraway war stuff. But the reality is huge and affecting global trade, energy, and even your next online purchase. The Houthi rebel group in Yemen, which controls large parts of the country's west, began aggressively targeting ships in the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden. This started in late 2023 and has continued into 2025, with hundreds of attacks claimed or reported against both commercial vessels and military ships. The Red Sea isn't just any waterway, it's one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world. Before the crisis, about 12 to 15% of all global maritime trade passed through here, especially between Asia and Europe via the Suez Canal. When Houthi forces started firing missiles, launching drones, and using explosive boats, many big shipping companies stopped using the route entirely. Instead, they sailed all the way around Africa's Cape of Good Hope, adding roughly 10 extra days and huge fuel costs to their trips. The numbers tell the story. Container traffic through the Suez fell dramatically in some months, down as much as 90% compared to normal levels, while freight rates between places like Shanghai and Rotterdam jumped over 80% because of longer routes and higher risk. This means delays in everyday goods, more expensive shipping costs, and pressure on supply chains already strained since COVID-19. Military forces have responded. The US and its allies launched operations like Operation Prosperity Guardian, deploying warships to protect merchant vessels, and conducted air and naval strikes against Houthi targets to reduce their capability to attack shipping. Despite periodic reductions in violence and claims of ceasefires, attacks have continued sporadically into 2025, making the Red Sea one of the most dangerous major trade routes in the world right now. That brings us to why this matters for US naval strategy next, especially the return of the supercarrier. At $13 billion, this aircraft carrier represents far more than just a large warship. But the reality is much more intense. Holding the title as the costliest warship ever built, the USS Gerald R. Ford sets a new benchmark in naval history. He has a total value that can easily exceed $25 to $30 billion. So what makes it so dangerous? It's dangerous because of speed, scale, and control. Start with control. The Ford class uses advanced radar systems, including the dual-band radar system, that can track hundreds of targets at once: aircraft, drones, even incoming missiles. Imagine trying to throw a rock at someone who can see it coming from miles away and respond instantly. That's the level of battlefield awareness we're talking about. Now scale. The flight deck is about 4.5 acres, roughly the size of 3 football fields. In that space, crews can arm, fuel, repair, and launch aircraft continuously. The ship's design improves aircraft movement efficiency by about 25% compared to older Nimitz-class carriers. That means faster turnaround times between missions. More missions in less time equals more pressure on the enemy. Then there's manpower. Nearly 5,000 personnel operate as one coordinated machine. Pilots, engineers, weapons crews, radar operators, cybersecurity teams. Speaking of cyber, modern carriers aren't just physical weapons. They operate in electronic and cyber domains. EA-18G Growlers can jam enemy radar and communications. That means before a single bomb drops, the enemy might already be blind and confused. Let's talk numbers that really matter. Range. A Super Hornet launched from a carrier can strike targets 500+ miles away, refuel mid-air, and extend that range even further. So even if the carrier stays far offshore, it can still influence events deep inland. And here's the overlooked part: mobility. A carrier can travel over 30 knots, about 35 miles per hour. That may not sound fast, but at sea it's powerful. In 24 hours, it can reposition hundreds of miles, making it unpredictable. It doesn't need foreign bases. It brings its own runway wherever it goes. However, raw power isn't the only factor here. There is also a geopolitical message being broadcast to the entire world. First, it's a message to Iran. During high-intensity operations, a US carrier strike group can fly upwards of 160 combat missions daily. That means within hours, dozens of fighter jets can be in the air, enforcing air superiority or striking targets. Compare that to most regional air forces that operate from fixed air bases, which can be hit or disabled. A carrier is mobile. It can reposition hundreds of miles overnight. That mobility makes it unpredictable and much harder to counter. Second, it's a signal to China. While tensions in the Indo-Pacific remain high, the US Navy is showing it can deploy a 100,000-ton supercarrier to the Middle East without weakening its Pacific presence. The US still maintains 11 nuclear-powered carriers, more than the rest of the world combined. That scale matters. It tells rivals that Washington can handle multiple theaters at once. Third, it reassures allies. Around 12% of global trade passes through the Red Sea and Suez Canal corridor. That's trillions of dollars in goods every year: energy, food, electronics. When commercial ships face drone and missile threats, insurance costs spike and supply chains slow down. A carrier strike group acts like a floating shield, backed by destroyers equipped with advanced missile defense systems. Sending a carrier is like parking a small, self-contained air force right off someone's coastline. But that doesn't mean it comes without serious risks. Missile saturation is the first and foremost deadly risk here. The modern anti-ship missiles, like China's DF-21D and DF-26, are specifically designed to target carriers at ranges of over 1,500 kilometers. Russia's hypersonic Zircon missile reportedly travels at speeds above Mach 8. Even Iran claims to possess anti-ship ballistic missiles capable of maneuvering mid-flight. Now imagine not one missile, but 20, 50, or even 100 launched at once. US Aegis destroyers can intercept threats using SM-2, SM-6, and ESSM missiles. But interception isn't guaranteed. In war, even a 90% success rate still means something gets through. Second, drone warfare has changed the game. In the Red Sea, Houthi forces have launched dozens of one-way attack drones and anti-ship missiles since late 2023. A drone can cost under $50,000. An interceptor missile can cost over $2 million. Finally, escalation risk. A carrier strike group carries nearly 5,000 sailors and over 60 aircraft. One serious hit could mean mass casualties and instant retaliation. And retaliation in today's environment doesn't stay local for long. So while carriers project power, they also raise the stakes dramatically. The question isn't whether it can project power, it's what happens next. Does this deployment prevent a wider war or bring the US one step closer to it? We want to hear your take. Drop your analysis in the comments below. And if you want more deep geopolitical breakdowns like this, subscribe and turn on notifications. The next global shift might already be underway.